Brad Brownell and Clemson shock a lot of people, including myself for sure, by making a really impressive Elite Eight run last season. A very inconsistent season, but the highs were really high in non-con and in the NCAA tournament, and the lows were frustrating because you knew this roster was talented in that they kind of needed to be more consistent. Christian and Nick here with Chapel Fowler covers Clemson for the state newspaper. So Chapel, I'm looking at some of these additions. And who you're bringing back. And once again, I think Clemson's going to have a very similar identity. What are expectations looking like this year, in this post PJ Hall era for Clemson?
Yeah. Post PJ Hall era is a really good way to say it because he was kind of the lifeblood of that program. Not that coaches are supposed to play favorites, but it's pretty obvious he might be like Brad Brunell's favorite guy he's ever coached just by the way he talked about him, even tearing up talking about him for the last time after that Bama loss. So, it's a sea change. Brad mentioned this in an interview, and I looked because I was interested, and he's right. 13 scholarship players for them this year, and 9 of them are newcomers. Now, 2 of these guys are people that were on the team last year but redshirted. So in terms of guys actually seeing the floor of their 13 scholarship players, only 4 of them are back. At the same time, those 4 are pretty good because you've got Chase Hunter in there. We all saw what he did. Ian Shefflin, the MIP of last year. Chase's little brother Dylan, who had some really good tournament moments and really came on there, especially in the later rounds. And then who's their last one?
Wiggins.
That is Wiggins, yeah. So, that's another guy who had a few moments. I thought Godfrey outplayed him a little bit in the tournament, but obviously he's gone now. So Wiggins has got some juice to him as well, and started about half their games last year. So that's a good returning core. But yeah, I think high expectations. I don't know if they'll be ranked in the preseason top 25, but they'll probably at least have a shot given on how they finished last year and who they have coming back, and how that's kind of about all you can base your preseason predictions on. That poll is such a crapshoot sometimes, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them ranked somewhere in the low 20s maybe. But, this team has never made back-to-back NCAA tournaments in Brunell's tenure. Now, the last time they did that was the last 2 years of the Oliver Purnell tenure, and then the first year of Brunell's tenure, which is dating back to the 2010 season, I think, is the last time that they did that. It was 08 through 10. So they're going to be expected to get back, and that's something they have not been able to do in a lot of different instances. They've had really good teams that have been just short, and then they made the tournament. They've had good teams that made the tournament and missed it the next year. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how they handle that and just kind of how they go about an entire season where it's very clear. We heard a lot last year. Brad would say over and over and over, I know this team is good. I know this team is good. Then everybody finally got to see that in the tournament on a national stage. And you bring back a few of the guys that kind of wrote that awesome story. Second Elite Eight ever, first in 44 years. I think was the longest, fourth longest stretch between Elite Eight appearances, all time. I think Loyola Chicago is the longest, only by 10 more years or so. So they had a super historic season, and eyes are on them now for good reason. So I'm really interested to see where they end up in preseason poll, in the preseason ACC poll in terms of where they'll finish. I assume they'll probably be a top 5, top 4 team, something like that. So they're going to have some expectations. There's no underdog mentality this time. They're coming in, and they got a big non-con schedule. That Kentucky game and the ACC SEC challenge is going to be super interesting. They host UNC and Duke at home this year, so they got a lot of marquee opportunities to kind of show what they're about. But that's also some added pressure that maybe they didn't have the year before. So yeah, it's going to be a fun season.
Yeah, that's an awesome schedule for sure. So you mentioned the 4 core key returners who are huge and vital to Bradell's offense and everything. I really like what he did in the transfer portal this season, to be honest with you. Bringing in an ACC familiar veteran guard and Zachary from Boston College is a good get. I like Lacken from Cincinnati. He's a good get. Miles Foss from Illinois State. Christian Reese from Duke. I mean, you can go down the list. And then redshirted Heidbreder, I think redshirted the year prior. So, a lot of people would forget him from Air Force. He had a really good season out there in the Mountain West Conference. Out of those 5 guys coming into the season, what can we expect out of them?
Yeah, you're totally right. I do think Clemson basketball has really more or less nailed every major transfer portal addition they've had over the last few years. You look at how good of a fit Joe Girard was last year. I mean, really just perfect for what they needed from that 2-guard spot. Jack Clark, although he was hurt last year at times, was good rangy defender. Going back 2 years ago, Galloway was a really good guard for them. So they've done a really, really good job. And that's Brunell and his entire staff just kind of evolving and realizing that college basketball a lot of times is, IDing a few key veterans like that kind of get you over the hump. It's also funny that all that's going on with a football coach who is notoriously not very fond of using the transfer portal. There's always like memes that go around anytime Clemson basketball gets a transfer edition, joking about the contrast between Brunell and Dabo Sweeney. But of those guys, yeah, and it's good to include Jake in that list too, just given the redshirt year. You're totally right. Like, you look at his stats. In the last year he played basketball, they do kind of blow you away. So I'm interested to see how he does. I like the Miles Foster pickup. I think just anytime you can get a guy in that range, he's at, what is he, like about 6'7", 230, yeah, something like that. Just like a really good, strong, athletic guy at a forward position who's scored pretty consistently at a lower conference level, of course, but has shown he can do it. And Zachary, I mean, he just totally torched them in the ACC tournament. That they were one and done up there, to the point where, like, I was the only Clemson media member, I think, from the regular beat that went to that game specifically, because there was almost this belief, like, yeah, they'll get past Boston College and they'll be in the semis or whatever it was, I think, or the quarters. And then everybody else will pop up from there. So that was a long, weird night in DC to see them just get totally torched like that. And Zachary was a huge part of that. I think it was 22 points or so he had. Kind of a unique guy. A little huskier, but a really good shooter, savvy. I like watching him play. I love seeing guys who kind of use their body strategically like that. Might not be the biggest jumper in the gym, but just know how to play the game. And you can see that with him. I think in terms of all those additions, I'd probably pencil him in for maybe the most points per game among those guys. I could see him easily slide into that starting role next to Chase Hunter in the backcourt. And I think Lacken from Cincinnati's interesting. The injury history there is maybe a little concerning, but at the same time, it's a guy who had like a 26-point game as a center last year at one point, which is like PJ Hall level numbers, at least for one game. I don't think it's totally fair to ask him to like replace PJ Hall's production. I mean, that's an insane thing to ask of anybody. That's like the number 8 leading scorer in Clemson basketball history. But if he can be, even, I don't know, 40 or 50% of what PJ Hall was, and provide that presence down low. I mean, just as a shot blocker and rebounder alone, you bring him in and he's your main down low guy. And then you got Ian Shefflin being able to do his thing and come in like Crash Bandicoot and just grab offensive rebounds from the craziest angles you'll ever see and kind of roam around it and do stuff as well as he does. I think that they can kind of bridge that gap a little bit, but obviously losing PJ, losing a guy who was just heart and soul of the team and could always just get you a bucket somehow, some way, is a huge loss. In terms of like pure bucket getters on this team, I'm interested to see, Chase Hunter can always do that for you, and did that a lot during the tournament. Outside of him, I don't think Shefflin is like the purest go get you a bucket scorer. He's kind of more of a scrappy guy who just suddenly ends up with 12 points, 10 rebounds at halftime before you even realize it. So I'm interested to see who, outside of Chase becomes like a reliable, okay, there's, 7 seconds left on the shot clock. We need a shot. Somebody score. Who else can do that for them? I think that's kind of a question going into the year for them for sure.
So want to speak on those additions as well. So Brownell is sticking with the formula of let me go steal a guard from the ACC let me go steal a guard in the ACC who's in his 5th year. Let me get my second Boston College guard in Jaden Zachary. But yeah, you described him super well. Husky guy, savvy, really good shooter, tough as nails, like been in the conference. Like that was like the biggest layup of like when I saw that, I was like, that makes so much sense that he's going to Clemson. Like that makes so much sense by Brad Burnell. So I think he's going to be an awesome fit in that backcourt. And then Victor Locken, like you mentioned it, he had some big games last year. His first 2 games in the Big 12, he went for 17 at BYU and then went for 17 against Texas at home in a 1-point loss. And then there were some DNPs mixed in with some playing and some injury. Like I understand with injuries, but my spidey senses are telling me that it was definitely something else involved. I don't know what it was, but there was something that didn't make sense to me because he was playing really well, and then he just like wasn't really a factor, but would like kind of spawn at random moments for a few minutes here and there. So I think bottom line, whatever happened, I think a change of scenery is good for him. And once again, I think Brownell nailed it. I think it's a great fit because that's a big boy down there. He's a grown man. He is strong. I think he's from Russia. So you've got, obviously you're going to miss what PJ brought to the table, right? But the thing that made Clemson so good last year at points and what frustrated me about them is when they played high-low and were under control and got the ball into PJ and to Shefflin, like they were so good because those guys are really good at creating looks for themselves in the post game to the free throw line and kicking it out. Like those guys are such efficient 2-point scorers, and Locken and Shiflin can be that duo, even if Locken isn't the player PJ Hall is. And both of Locken can also step out and shoot it at 7 foot. And him and Ian being able to do that, they're going to be able to play the same style as when PJ Hall was there, even if he's not PJ Hall. So that I think is an important note. And you look at the rest of the starting lineup, Wiggins seems like a guy that's just still oozing that potential at 6'10", who can shoot the three and move. Like there were times where he kind of seemed to disappear. I thought Clemson was definitely at their best when he was playing well. We talked about Zachary, and then Chase Hunter, man. Chase Hunter, when I saw you at the ACC tournament back in 2018, that was like my first kind of – no, not 2018. Oh, my God. I meant 2022.
22, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I said that. I'll get my college and high school graduation years confused. But Chase Hunter at the ACC tournament in 2022, that was my first kind of introduction to how good he was. Like I was like, this guy's really good. How come I haven't really noticed him before? And then what frustrated me about him is I kind of put him on this level of this guy's really good, and then it was just inconsistent. And last year there were moments where I'm like, man, when he's being aggressive, when he's knocking down shots, he's a very, very high caliber guard. And then there were other times where I'm like, he's not playing defense, he's not involved offensively. Like, what is going on? But then, I really think that playing that well in the tournament, obviously the highlight at the end of the Arizona game is what sticks in mind. But he was great all tournament. He needs to be the leader of this team. And I think having that momentum, having that March success will allow him to do that. So I'm counting on Chase to be high quality Chase consistently because they absolutely 100%. Need it for this team to be good. But I think, at this age, he's got to be 23 or 24 now.
Yeah, I think he's about 23 now. Yeah.
So super high on Chase. And this roster looks like it's going to go 9 deep, right? That was a lot, but just can you speak a little bit more about Jake Highbreder from Air Force? Like this is a dude that was a absolute knockdown shooter. Is he kind of in this Alex Hemingway role? Is he able to defend it all? I'm pretty sure Air Force was not a good defensive team. And then Christian Reeves from Duke. Anyone coming with that Duke pedigree who was kind of one of these guys that didn't play. Like a lot of those guys have gone elsewhere and done really well. Do you think Christian Reeves is a guy that can be a really strong piece to this front court behind Locken and Shiflin? Yeah,
Jake is really fascinating. Just again, you look at the numbers and you're really like, wow, this guy is putting up like near triple doubles sometimes. I've never seen him play like this thing. I haven't watched his Air Force film, and obviously he was not on the court at all last year. And it's I can't tell. It seemed like maybe they knew that the injury might be a year-long thing. Whenever they got him, they didn't totally seem surprised by the fact they kind of shut him down for the year, even though fans were a little concerned about that. So I guess he's in a good spot. But yeah, no, Hemingway role, that's a good note. I think that could be a good fit for him. It's something about the way they played. It seemed like, Hemingway was always hurt, but when he wasn't, he was making like 50% of his 3-pointers. So they'll get him open. And Jake is in a spot where he maybe doesn't have to do a ton for them. He's not going to need to start and average 30 points or anything. It could be a guy who can settle in off the bench. I'm sure some of these like earlier non-conference games will be huge for him. Just if you don't play for an entire year to kind of settle in and see what your role is. But yeah, definitely a guy that could be in the rotation. Reeves, I don't know. I mean, another guy who's had some injury history, big body. It's never an issue to bring in a 7'1", like 250 guy or whatever he is. You're never going to hate having that option on your bench. I watched him play a little bit at Duke, and I think kind of the talent's there. But Duke obviously took him on as a very developmental project type player. I think Clemson is doing the same. I think that they want to be patient with him. You bring in Victor as well. So you're not asking Christian to totally be the guy down low and replace PJ Hall or anything. but that's definitely a spot where, a guy could grow like in that backup center position for them. They will rotate. Brunell isn't afraid to pop guys in if the starting lineup's not doing well. And they probably will go, something like 8-9 deep this year, kind of spread out those minutes, especially with how hard like Shefflin plays. Like, I just know that guy has to get tired sometimes. Dabo Swinney always says he's like, if he could pick one Clemson basketball player to be a football player, it would be Ian Shefflin, and he wants to steal him from Brunell, even though he knows Brunell would be mad about that. So, yeah, I mean, it really just the whole transfer class. That's a good thing about covering Clemson basketball. They have one or two program guys that are around for a while. You kind of get to see those guys develop and how they do. But then they bring in like a really fun class of transfers every year, it seems like. You get to see those guys play, learn their stories, and then kind of see how it all meshes together. And yeah, I've been really impressed with just how they've been able to assemble rosters, not totally from scratch, but, start over about halfway a few years in a row now. They've had two really, really good seasons now with that combination of, your home ground talent, your guys that are regional from Atlanta or North Carolina or South Carolina, Hunter Tyson, Chase Hunter, PJ Hall, these guys, mesh them together with some handpicked transfer portal guys and just really roll with it. You look at where they're at in the ACC in terms of like total wins and conference wins over the last 5-6 years. Not the best team in the league by any means, but certainly kind of in that upper echelon at least. So, it's a place that people want to come to, not to the level of like a UNC or Duke by any means. But they've renovated their facilities a few years ago. They're about to do another set of renovations to Little John Coliseum. Then they're going to present that to the Board of Trustees in a month or so and kind of get that underway for the next year. Brunell talks a lot about NIL very openly, which again is very different than Dabo Swinney does. So the contrast between those two programs is always funny. He's very open about saying, like one of the reasons Chase Hunter is back here for this last year is because of NIL. Like this is a guy who has a kid, like he's about on to work for his age, but he's running this back, and obviously you wouldn't really want to be doing that for $0. So it's definitely a spot that appeals to veteran guys, I think, especially like you mentioned, fifth-year guys, maybe guys who want to do one more year in a different environment. And Clemson basketball doesn't have the biggest fan base in the world by any means, but it's a very loyal group that does follow them. There's a lot of Twitter accounts that are obsessed with Clemson basketball and such.
Spammins.
So, Cliff Spannins, right? Yeah, Cliff Spannins, the dude. Everybody's favorite. Players' favorite, too. Even the players know about that guy. So it's a fun environment, I think that's drawn in a number of guys, and then 47 wins or whatever it is over the last 2 years certainly doesn't hurt your recruiting pitch also. So yeah, those transfers I think will maybe make or break this team, just in terms of can they get back to the tournament, can they be a Sweet 16 team, something like that. Those new additions, you kind of know what you have with the new returners, but these new guys, a few of those vets will probably determine how far Clemson can go in 24-25.
Nick, any final questions?
No, sorry if you guys can hear that leaf blower in the background. It's going crazy right now, so I had to mute myself. No, I don't have any questions or concerns. I guess if I did, though, a few years, like 2 years back, I think, when Hunter Tyson had left, and it was just PJ Hall. I just loved like how they meshed and how they played off each other. And I had the same question. I have the same question now with PJ Hall gone, and it's just me and Shefflin. They just complemented each other so well last season. Do you think Lacken and Shefflin will complement each other similarly than they did, or?
Yeah, no, I remember thinking the same thing. Like, you have a really awesome Hunter Tyson, PJ Hall duo, and then Hunter Tyson's leaves, and you're like, gosh, like how are they ever gonna be as good as they were last year with Hunter Tyson gone and just PJ Hall? And then he elevates himself to first team All ACC level, and then Shefflin pops in right there, and he's the ACC MIP and a really good kind of Batman Robin duo. But when I think about this year's team, I think more about Shefflin and like a Chase Hunter versus the pure down low combination. I think just like Chase was in the ACC tournament loss, I think he shot like 1 for 12 or 0 for 12 and was like a -28 from the floor or something. It was like a crazy plus minus. Like it was just, it was one of the worst games I've seen from like a college guard. And fans were like so out on that dude. And then to do what he did in the tournament, and the way he plays, like so strong, all those jump steps and kind of little D-Wade style floaters in the paint. He just brought like there's so much momentum to a guy whose senior season at that point was really just kind of coming to like a sad fizzle. So I think more about complementary ball between him and Shefflin, just as those being like the two clear leaders on this team. I do assume Victor will probably start, just given kind of his track record and the obvious need for somebody to come in there who has experience and can play and can block shots and can kind of pick stuff up around the offense. And like you mentioned, the 3-point shooting ability for him certainly doesn't hurt either. That's something that, if Reeves were to progress to the level of fighting for that starting spot, that's something he does not have. So that's something that Victor's got on him, and I'm sure helps him because, PJ Hall probably shot 3 or 4 3-pointers a game last year, probably a few more than Brunell wanted at times. But that is part of their offense. I didn't realize Shefflin was so good on 3-pointers last year. Not a ton of attempts, but he was
low volume, but he was
like 46% or something. So he'll take a lot more 3-pointers this year. So that's another part of his game that I'm interested to see. Does that translate when you're taking like 100 threes instead of 46 or whatever it was? But yeah, I think more about Chase and Ian as that top Batman Robin combo as opposed to the pure down low combination. Clemson was really spoiled to have the combination of Tyson Hall and then Hall Shefflin to have all three of those guys together. 3 really good recruiting finds for sure. They were able to kind of develop and coach up into what they became. And again, we'll see that from Ian again this year. If he can take that step to, can you go from the ACC most improved player to a second team ACC guy to a first team ACC guy? That's a pretty big jump. So I don't totally know, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him and Chase probably right up there at the top of their, points per game leaderboard. But it'll probably be pretty spread out. It was last year. So I'm sure a few guys will get in there as well. I don't think you'll see Hunter scoring like, 20 a game or anything. It might be more like 15. And then a few guys in the 12, 10 range behind him.
Couple final notes.
Yeah.
One, you mentioned PJ Hall, 3rd team All ACC the year prior, which just reminded me that was my last year. I had an All ACC vote, and I put him on my first team, and I thought that was like totally fair. So I just wanted to lay it out there.
I think I did too. Yeah, I think I did the AP poll, the AP ACC thing. And I think I voted him first team as well because he ended the year like really, really good, like better than Tyson did. Yeah,
he was underrated for far too long. 2, on the under Hunter Shefflin point, I think both of them totally have within the range of outcomes to be either first or second team all league, and I think Clemson to reach their ceiling absolutely needs those guys to lead the way and to even take another step as leaders as well. And then the last thing, mini note, I think RJ Godfrey is going to ball out at Georgia. I've always been a huge fan of him. I just think he was just a lot of guys that comes in. I wanted to see him stay one more year because I think he could be really good, but we'll track him at Georgia. And then last thing is we have this freshman incoming class of Dallas Thomas, Ace Buckner, Del Jones, then Asia Thomas redshirted. Are any of those guys going to be in the fold this year? Because I think the 9 guys ahead of them all probably will be.
Yeah, ton of vets to kind of fight for playing time. But yeah, you look at like just down to the composite recruiting ranking for these 3 freshmen they have coming in, and I put it, number 79 overall, Dallas Thomas, and then Buckner and Jones are like 137, 144. That's like a level of just dude that Clemson doesn't get a ton of. But I think you're kind of seeing these last few years pay off to where some recruits are kind of seeing Clemson as not that ACC favorite at all, but a team that can compete, a team that they like the playing style of. Like they did a really good job recruiting high school as well. Buckner obviously is a legacy kid. His dad played at Clemson and was awesome. I think of those 3, I'd probably guess Jones. Just if you've seen some of the videos of him dunking, I don't really know how you can't be somewhat excited about him. And then, guard wise, you obviously have Chase, and then Dylan Hunter is your clear second guard. Zachary is there too, but outside of those 3, like, is there room for Del Jones to do his thing and kind of develop into some sort of role as a freshman? I think so, and I think that explosiveness is never going to hurt you. Not totally sure about the other 2 guys yet. I think just you talk about the forward center, kind of the front court rotation, that there's a few more dudes there. Experience wise, Shefflin is going to command a lot of minutes and shots for good reason, and same for Victor and your other guy Foster, and just everything they have there. So I think of those 3, I'd guess Jones to some degree, but I'm not totally sure. I would like to see him on a fast break though, and just see what he's got cooking, because the open gym videos have been interesting so far. But take that with a grain of salt, because what Ben Simmons looks really good in open gyms too. So you never know until they're until they're on the court.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Chapel. Good luck with everything this year, the rest of football season and basketball season down in Clemson.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.